process of photography is very deliberate. We are removing ourselves from the everyday working as jobbing photographers.
Let's write this down.
And placing ourselves into quite a perilous position, both commercially, financially and professionally, because we're saying this is only what we do, this is only what we want to do, and this is really the justification for stating our case as fine art photographers.
Why do I do that? I think one of the things I actually love about the landscape, seascape work, apart from its simplicity, is it is so limited on its interpretation, but it's also something which can't be changed. It can't be interfered with, it can't be ruined, if you like. I have so many images of other places which suddenly you look back over 15 years and another tower's gone up, or there's a crane in the background, or they've cut the trees down or something. And what I love about the horizon images, and that's what really motivates me, is it cannot be changed, it cannot be ruined. It's exactly how it was that day as it was 200 years ago.
Or indeed 2 million years ago.
Yes, exactly, or indeed hopefully a million years in the future.
Yeah.
And it's really just the interpretation of that moment. And I love the duration of the time exposure and the simplification of the process, and that's what really appeals.
So it's almost like a sort of antidote to civilization.
Yeah, if you like, it really is. It's like a long Sunday afternoon walk with the sun out. It's a really lovely moment, and it's something which really sort of drives you. And the thing I often find extraordinary is you come back from a day's commercial work and you will have up to 2,000-3,000 images. I can come back from a day in some remote landscape and I can have less than 30. And it's the consideration that goes into the image and the choice of that image that is so important. It's not just about getting as much material as possible and figuring out whether it works later. It's actually getting it right at the time and just seeing what's available at the time.
But also from your folio of work, you've been fortunate enough to travel around the world and come back with different variations of the same thing, but so many of them have this distinctive quality of being divided into the two separate halves, if you like, if I can use that expression. You've got the sky, the horizon and the foreground. Some of it's Caribbean, some of your other work which is in the USA and in other parts of the world, deserts. So this again, the sort of antidote to civilization, this appreciation of the natural world, is obviously a very strong motive for you to continue to go back there, because there's considerable expense and effort and time has to be allocated to do this. This is not taking a camera on holiday and hoping you're going to come back with something. This is a deliberate reason to go to Death Valley or to the Maldives or wherever you feel you can get this landscape that's going to say something to the viewer about why you want to record it. Are those decisions that have always been in the forefront of your mind when you do this, or have they been happenstance because you've actually been there and suddenly there's a horizon that suits your language at that time?
I think it's hard to say, but I think it's a bit of both, if truth be told. I think we all end up in places and you suddenly go, that's fantastic, that's beautiful. How many of us have not been on the top of a mountain and suddenly gone, look at that view, that's extraordinary, it's stunning. And then how many times have we been on another mountain and gone, oh, that view must have been amazing, must have been stunning, until they built that down there, or until they did something else. Or sometimes, I remember once I was in Indonesia and I went up to the top of a volcano in Indonesia. The friend I was travelling with at the time, we got out, we walked up the side of the mountain from 3 in the morning to get there for the sunrise, and we got there at about 6 in the morning, just as the sun was coming up, and 3 busloads of tourists went past us, and it completely ruined the moment. And I'm not just being selfish, it was just, the whole process was wonderful to get to the top of that mountain, but then strangely enough, to be on top of that mountain with people barging around in front of you taking selfies and snapshots and other imagery, much as it's important to them, just removed the magic. And I think a lot of my images, it is about that magic. It's about those moments in time when everything seems to come together.
It's interesting because when one looks at the body of your commercial work, where it's mostly to do with the professional portrait, and not as recognition of the sort of society shot, but of people in working life doing the things they have to do, commissioned by everybody from industry and the armed forces, and you are depicting how they're working within their role, subject to a brief, presumably set by the marketing department or the editor.
Absolutely.
Or whatever it is. Have you not ever thought about, do people belong in any of these landscapes when the landscape is an embodiment of the natural world without people in it? Have you ever thought about incorporating them in?
Yeah, I think you can have people within a landscape, but I think it instantly dates a landscape. And the question really has to be, is it about the people and the landscape, or is it just about the people, or is it literally about the landscape? And all of those criteria are valid. You could do all three. I could think of, all sorts of scenarios where that would work. I just get drawn to the imagery which allows you to tell the story about the landscape. If you take a landscape and put someone in it, whether it's a farmer or a coal miner or a soldier or anything, then the story's already told. And I think there's something actually lovely about looking at a landscape, not necessarily knowing where it is, not necessarily knowing what country it is in. All you have is the image in front of you and the time of day and the weather. And I think that's the beginning of any story.
From a technical point of view, it's fairly obvious to the viewer that even if it's not communicated in any form of description, that you use what is known as a very slow time exposure, or rather very long time exposure, and that the passage of water and sky is obviously moving across the frame, and the static lines are set by the definitive elements of a horizon, which you can't change those. But then everything in the background and to an extent some of the near foreground is blurring. Could you tell us something about why you decided to do that as opposed to taking an exposure at a faster shutter speed which arrests everything?
I think it adds, I definitely do that, and an exposure anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 or 3 minutes is something which I get drawn to. It takes the original landscape, and of course you're talking about a landscape where something has to be moving, so it's either a cloudscape, seascape, or both of those things, and then you populate it with a couple of things such as a foreshore, horizon, or a tree or something, or even a building, which is static, and so you get that movement, and that passage of time I think is fascinating. And again, it tells a story. It's suddenly no longer the moment, which is what most photography is about. Most photography, when you bump into it throughout your life, is a moment, whereas a long exposure where the elements within that image actually change to become something else, that's where the magic lies. And it becomes almost sort of like a sort of mystery, different approach, different element. It's like being in a different place. But that panoramic camera was purely to achieve one thing, which was a panoramic image. And I think what people have to do, regardless of whichever camera they use, regardless whether it's digital or film, I think you have to decide what it is you want to achieve with that and use it accordingly. And some people obviously advocate film, some people will only shoot digital. I don't think it really matters. I think it's just a question of what you use to hopefully let you achieve whatever it is that you're looking for. Yeah, the beginning of last year was a different time for everyone as the pandemic took hold, but we were lucky in that respect when Atelier came along and actually asked us to join as a collective to show our work to an audience which we hadn't got access to before. And in a time when the world had stopped still, and in a time when the world was actually so fast and so quick to move on, Atelier and the production of fine art prints slowed everything down. It gave everybody an opportunity to start to see value in something again, rather than just quickly looking at something and then moving on. So the idea, I think, which appealed to me most of all about Atelier, was you could spend as much time and effort as you would like on creating an image, but Atelier gave you an outlet to show that time and that level of interest to another audience. And that's really what got me going.